Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes. The Locked On Hawkeyes is a part of the Locked On Sports Network, and we are the latest addition to the Locked On Sports Network's growing lineup of college podcasts. I'm your host, Andrew Wade, editor over at DearOldGold.com, where you can find analysis pieces on all things black and yellow, and there is a lot of stuff going on in the Hawkeye world today, and we have a very special guest with us today, Quinn Douglas, who I believe has written for Dear Old Gold and now writes for Saturday Blitz. Quinn, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing fantastic, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, buddy. And where can the folks find you on Twitter? You're a great follow.
You can follow me at Quinn Douglas _FS on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle.
Awesome, man. How did you get into writing? I know, obviously, you write for a Saturday Blitz, and I know you put some stuff out potentially for Dear Old Gold. Would love to hear a little bit more of your backstory on that.
I really got started. It's really in high school. We had a journalism class in high school, and I covered a lot of the sporting events. I went to a small high school, only about 150 kids total, 9 through 12. So I was kind of involved. I kind of knew about everything. I knew about football, obviously playing football in high school, men's basketball, women's basketball, track and field. So I kind of did a little bit of everything. I really started to explore it more when I got into college. My first sports writing job was at a website called thesportsquotient.com. I found it out through one of the heads of the journalism department here at the University of Iowa, who sends out emails routinely, job opportunities and internships. And it so happened to come up one day. I thought I would apply and use some of my material from high school. And I got the job, and I was there for about a month and a half. And then about towards the end of October, I was recruited to come write for Fan-Sided Saturday Blitz. And in late October 2017, I joined Saturday Blitz as a contributor, and I've been there ever since.
That's awesome, man. That's fantastic. It's interesting how everyone kind of gets started with writing and with kind of sports in general. I mean, heck, I started literally about a year ago, wanted to get back into the passion of writing. I did the same thing in high school and throughout college, and was able to jump in pretty quickly. So exciting stuff. And man, we have a good episode today to talk about with our listeners, though. On segment 1, we're going to be talking about Iowa basketball and what the season has meant to us at this point, giving kind of a recap and then talking through, the MVPs, disappointments, that sort of thing. We're about a quarter of the way, maybe a third of the way through the season. So wanted to touch on that. And then in segment 2, we're going to be discussing all of the news and awards that have been handed out. And there has been a ton of stuff happening since our last episode. And then finally, on segment 3, we're going to take a look at the Hawkeyes' performance in the NFL. There were some fantastic performances this past weekend, namely George Kittel. And just in general, man, the Iowa Hawkeyes are really showing out this year, as they do most years. But I think we're starting to see a little bit more of the position players make an impact. Obviously, we're usually seeing a lot of offensive linemen have fantastic years, but it's a little bit harder to notice them when they're in the trenches and they're not putting up the 10 touchdowns or 1,100 receiving yards that Kittel is. So, and then that's going to be our episode for today. So, before we jump in, though, I want to make sure that our listeners are subscribing to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast at. And please leave us a review. We love to hear from you on your thoughts, content suggestions, feedback, etc. And you can follow the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast at Locked On Iowa. And you can follow myself at Wade_Andrew. So, Quinn, let's get started right now with segment number 1. Looking at the Iowa basketball season, I would say it's a pretty great season so far. They're 7-2. They got off to a hot start. They beat Oregon and UConn. Granted, neither of which are ranked now. Oregon's kind of dropped out and, hasn't looked as good as what preseason expectations are. They lost to Wisconsin in the game I really think they should have won, and they got blown out by Michigan State. But they came back big on Thursday night and had an awesome win versus Iowa State. I loved the energy and intensity that game brought. And obviously, it got a little chippy. But personally, I love seeing the emotion in it. And were you at that game?
I was calling the game for KRUI, so I was really having to be on my toes. As a matter of fact, I was doing play-by-play for the first half for KRUI. I believe it was the under-12 timeout is when the Cordell Pempsel Michael Jacobson incident happened. And I was looking down at the stats website that the university provides for all the basketball games, and I look up, and next thing I know, I see Jacobson and Pempsel shoving each other back and forth. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, when did this happen? Like, what caused this? So it was, I definitely never seen vitriol like that at that kind of a level for Iowa and Iowa State. It's always been a pretty respectful rivalry, but that was really a first for me seeing something along those lines.
Yeah, man, it escalated quickly, and it obviously at the end of the game, obviously we had additional issues, and it really
Yeah.
seemed to center around Jacobson and to an
Yeah.
extent Connor McCaffrey. And I heard a lot of, I talked to a lot of Iowa State fans, and their big sentiment was everyone's going to hate Connor McCaffrey for the next 4 years as
Oh
he
yeah.
plays for the
Yeah.
Iowa Hawkeyes.
Absolutely.
And
I can agree with that.
yeah, I mean, and part of me was like, I totally get it, but I'm glad he's on our team. At the same
Yeah.
time, Jacobson was the same type of player on the other side. I mean, he was stirring up a lot of that. And it's interesting because, he's a transfer student. Granted, he's from, I believe, Waukee, or he played in
He played high
the
school.
Central.
He played high school ball at Waukee. Yep.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, so I mean, he understands what that means, and I will say though, I like
Mhm.
the intensity of it. You're right. You don't typically see that kind of stuff in an Iowa State game. It's a competitive rivalry, but it's respectful.
Yeah.
But I also think Steve Prohm really didn't help that along. He was kind of getting into it, and I thought Fran McCaffrey really handled it in the best way he possibly could. I personally thought. I wanted to get your
And
thoughts on
Steve
that.
came out in the post. Steve came out in the post game press conference and apologized for his actions. He said that he didn't handle it the way he should have, and I was glad to see that. I'm glad he took the high road, took full responsibility for what happened.
Absolutely, yeah, and I did see that too. It's just it was a fun game, man, and I think that was the difference between Iowa falling out of the rankings this week and versus staying in the rankings, because Iowa State's a really well respected team. They have a few people that have been injured. They were dealing with some suspensions throughout the year, and then obviously they have the two transfers that have come in and kind of led the team so far. So big win for the Hawks. One of the things the biggest thing I love to see from that game is Corden Pemsel, who was supposed to be redshirting and then decided to try it out again. And man, his energy was enthusiastic. It was awesome. It was so much fun to watch.
Game changer. It was a game changer, and I think you were just as shocked as everybody in press row was when I believe it was Chad Lysico, the Des Moines Register, was the one who broke it probably about an hour before tip off, and I think everybody was just as surprised as you were. And at that point, we had just found out that Wieskamp was going to be able to go. So it was kind of everything was happening at once before the game. So it's kind of hitting you all at once. So you're trying to scramble and figure out, okay, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? So it was definitely a crazy build up to the game, which turned out to be a very exciting one.
Absolutely. I kind of equate, I like LeBron James. I'll openly admit that I'm not a big specific NBA team fan, but it kind of reminded me of like a Matthew Dellavedova in the sense, just energetic all over the court, willing to be that guy doing the dirty work. Mm-hmm. And I love that he stepped in right before, Connor McCaffrey and Tyler Cook did anything and kind of shoved, Nicholson. I thought that was fantastic.
Michael Jacobson and let him know this isn't going to happen.
Yeah. I thought that was great. Like he knew what his role in that situation was. So it was fantastic to see. Mm-hmm. Well, man, I want to talk about, jumping into Tyler Cook. If we had to talk about kind of where we're at this point in the season, personally, I would say Tyler Cook has been far and away the MVP of the team. I mean, he's playing like a freaking madman out there. He's, attacking the rim. He's getting the free throw line. Even if he's not really capitalizing on the amount of free throws attempts he's taking, he has been dominant on the offensive side of the board and more engaged on the defensive side of the board. Even if, I think the Michigan State game was a little bit of an outlier for his season where he really struggled defensively and they attacked down low. But I think that has just as much to do with Luke Garza as it does Tyler Cook. But wanted to get your thoughts. Who is your MVP for this season?
Well, I think you're right on that. I definitely think it's Tyler Cook. Although, personally, I think you could really make a case for Connor McCaffrey, even though he's not a starter. He has been a glue guy for the Hawkeyes coming off the bench. He's probably been the most consistent player game in and game out, just in terms of being steady, getting his buckets, being able to run the offense at a very, very high level. So Tyler Cook is the obvious choice, but I think you could really make a case for Connor McCaffrey. But like I said, Tyler Cook's been setting the world on fire, and I have been game in and game out. I'm just more and more impressed with his effort, his intensity, and his hustle, along with the freak skill set that he's shown on the offensive end.
Absolutely. And I think, touching on the Connor McCaffrey, I don't disagree at all. The guy's been fantastic. And when he's out there, the team is just so much more efficient offensively. Against Iowa State, when he wasn't on the court, they struggled a little bit to get things moving. And personally, I don't mean this to attack any players. They're all college kids, but the ball kind of stops and dies when Jordan Bohannon is the one running the point guard position. And the offense is operating at a more efficient level, and McCaffrey's one because he's a true point guard, has a true point guard mindset, I feel like, when he's in the game. And
He definitely does. He does, and I think Jordan does an okay job of being able to distribute the ball. But right now, he's in a funk, and it happens with great shooters like Jordan. Every once in a while, you're gonna get in a funk, and I don't mind. And you saw him take some shots against Iowa State in games before that, where it's like, well, I'm not sure, but what all he's trying to do there is just make sure he can get his confidence back, find his stroke, because as good as a shooter as Jordan Bohannon is, this slump won't last for long for him.
absolutely, and it's kind of impressive that Iowa's gotten out to the start they've had with Jordan Bohannon struggling so much from the 3-point line and everywhere pretty much on the court in terms of shooting. And honestly, I would say if I had to pick my biggest disappointment, it would be Jordan Bohannon. I mean, he was expected, and not that he isn't being. He is the leader of this team. He is the guy who's going to move this team forward, and he's the guy that ultimately, if they want to win games in March, they're going to need him to be hot. And so to be at 7-2 with him struggling as much as he is, I mean, I'm pretty impressed so far. And then also, I would say Luke Garza has kind of been a relative disappointment. I mean, this guy is an inside-out type player. He can, he's a former 4-star recruit, and he is struggling to shoot the ball. He doesn't seem like he's really putting his, for lack of a better term, putting his back into it. He's not willing to be aggressive down low, and he's kind of getting pushed around, which is disappointing because of the size advantage he has held on pretty much every single team that the Hawkeyes have played. For you, who would be your biggest disappointment?
Well, if you asked me before we played Iowa State, I would have had to say Isaiah Moss, because he really had a slow start to the year up until the Iowa State game, where he absolutely shot.
He went off
in the first half, which was unbelievable. He kept, I mean, it didn't matter if the threes were contested or not. He was taking it and he was making it. And it was definitely, if Isaiah Moss to make his shots consistently like he did against Iowa State, Iowa would be a contender for the Big Ten championship in the regular season. But unfortunately, Moss doesn't really have that consistency. But I would have to say, I think you're right on the Jordan Bohannon part. I think he has been the biggest disappointment. Not that he hasn't been good per se, he just hasn't lived up to what we thought he could be this year. And Luka Garza, I think, is more of an example of, this is his second year. The sophomore blues is a real thing. Like it's sometimes it's unexplainable, but in his case, I think it's the jump of competition happens so drastically. I mean, granted, Syracuse and Oregon were good teams, but I don't think they had the talent in the post outside of Bull for Oregon to really match up with Luka Garza. And once they got into Wisconsin and Michigan State, Garza got thrown right in there with some of the best posts in the country, and Ethan Happ, Nick Ward, just to name a few. He got really thrown into the fire really early on against two of the best post players in the Big Ten Conference.
Absolutely. I mean, you make a really good point. Even, Bull was very, is going to be very good. He obviously has an NBA future ahead of him, but he's just a freshman as well, so he's still figuring out the game, and it's a little bit easier to manipulate someone like him than it's going to be to manipulate a senior like Ethan Happ. So I would have to agree with that. And then finally, jumping into kind of the biggest surprise of the season, I would honestly say it's Connor McCaffrey and Joe Wieskamp making such impressive contributions. Obviously, Joe is, Gatorade All Iowa play, Iowa Gatorade Player of the Year. He's a 4-star recruit, one of the top recruits Fran's ever had. So you expect him to make a contribution, but he's really been impressive to me on both sides of the floor, defensively and offensively, just getting involved in the game. And then obviously coming back with a sprained ankle and trying to play. I mean, he didn't set the world on fire against Iowa State, but it was still impressive nonetheless to come back on such short time. And then finally, McCaffrey, what you said earlier is absolutely right. The guy has been the glue guy for the offense, and he's really been the guy who gets that offense going, and I love seeing him on the floor. He's a true floor general, and you even saw it when they were playing Iowa State with Isaiah Moss on fire. There's one point Connor McCaffrey kind of drove, backed off the defenders, and just turned around and just handed the ball to Isaiah Moss to just drain another three-pointer. So that's really been impressive to me so far.
I'd have to give a lot. I agree with both of those. I can see why people, especially you, would choose those players. But I'm going to throw out somebody I don't think is going to be talked about enough, and that is Ryan Krieger. He's cooled off a little bit in the last 4 games against the Power 5 teams, but he had, especially in New York against Bull, he dominated Bull, this supposed freak sensation, which he is. I mean, it's no disrespect to Bull, but Bull got absolutely schooled by Ryan Krieger, a kid from Spirit Lake, Iowa, who came out of high school as a 3-star recruit and took a 5-star freak of nature like Bull and just absolutely schooled him. in Madison Square Garden, nonetheless. I think Ryan Kriener has been a very integral part. It just doesn't show on the stat sheet. He's making the effort plays. He's doing what he's supposed to. He knows his job. Fran McCaffrey has been really high about how much Ryan Kriener improved from last season. That's why I think Ryan Kriener is definitely definitely the most improved player and definitely the surprise player of the year for Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very fair choice there. I mean, he's the second player off the bench on Connor McCaffrey, and he's the first player to come in the front court. So he's been a huge contributor so far. He has a couple double-digit scoring games, and again, he's one of those guys who can be effective down low or at the 3-point line and makes post players work harder, even when you have Cook off the floor or Garza off the floor. So I definitely don't disagree with that at all. Well, man, real quick, before we jump into, I think that kind of wraps it up for the basketball talk for today. Before we jump into segment 2, though, have you ever heard of Sling TV?
I think I've heard bits and pieces about it. I know I heard it a couple times on your podcast.
Awesome. Well, you'll hear it again here because we have a fantastic offer for you and for the rest of our Locked On listeners. Because if you're like me, you hate to miss your favorite team play, regardless of who they are playing. And that's where Sling TV comes in. Now, we never have to miss a football or a basketball game. And the best part is we no longer have to pay for a bunch of channels we don't even watch with a typical cable package. For just $30 a month, you can get access to ESPN, Big Ten Network, and more without the hassle of a long-term contract. What's even more exciting is that we have a fantastic offer for you. Our Locked On listeners can get a free 7-day trial by going to sling.com/lockedon. That's SLING.com/lockedon. Never miss a game again with Sling TV. All right, man. So before we jump into segment 2, wanted to quickly give our listeners a quick announcement. On segment 3, we're going to be talking about the Hawks in the NFL. Want to make sure you are aware to stick on after we get through with segment 2, because segment 2 is going to be riveting and exciting. Tons of stuff have been happening in the Hawkeye world the last few days. And the first one I wanted to quickly touch on is that the Hawks received a commitment from a kicker, Luke Amara, from Wisconsin. And typically, kickers don't really, move my chains or tickle my fancy a ton. But I looked at some of his videos and whatnot, and the kid's got a big leg. He's 6'3", 205 pounds, really strong leg, not super heavily recruited. But I think with Miguel Racino's leaving, obviously Keith Duncan kicked 2 years ago, and he's kind of the front runner to win the kicking job this upcoming year. But this is a guy I think we may want to watch out for. I mean, he's kicked field goals as long as 60 yards, so there's some talent there coming up from Wisconsin.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Iowa's had a great history of kickers, especially since Kirk Ferentz took over. You look right when Ferentz really went about Ferentz's second or third years when Nick Kading came into the program, and he was a game changer on the special teams. One of the best field goal kickers, the best field goal kicker in Iowa history, I would say, and one of the best field goal kickers probably in the history of the Big Ten Conference. You have other clutch kickers such as Kyle Schlicker, who replaced Nate Kading. Daniel Murray, he hit the game-winning field goal against Penn State all those years ago to help propel Iowa into their second big run under Kirk Ferentz. Other kickers, some others that kind of get forgotten are kickers like Mike Meyer, who was a very consistent kicker for some of those teams in the early part of the second decade of the 2000s. And Marshall Kane was also a very good kicker for the Hawkeyes. So Iowa's had a history of pretty good kickers coming in and out of the program. And hopefully he's the next in a long line of good kickers coming into Iowa City.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to see what he can do. It'll be a fun battle to watch next season. And so sticking with the theme of football, we have another transfer, and this is kind of the time for transfers. At the end of the season, you start kind of looking at the depth chart. You start looking at the prospect of your playing time, and you have to make a decision that's going to impact your future. And unfortunately, we're losing another cornerback. Trey Kramer, redshirt freshman, is going to be leaving the program, and it makes sense. I mean, Iowa had 2 true freshmen starting this past year in a few games. We had Riley Moss and Julius Brents, and obviously you have Hankins and Ojemudia that are going to be battling at them for playing time. There doesn't leave a lot of playing time for some of the other reserve players who are still young guys, but obviously they want to search for greener pastures. And it sounds like you even know Kramer, and it's going to be even tougher departure for you.
Yeah, I do Trey. We had a class together first semester freshman year. I don't like to name drop or kind of drop that in there, but he was a good kid, and I always respected what he was about. Very bright young man. Just a really easy guy to get along with. He was he was a funny guy, had a great sense of humor, But when it got down to business, he's one of the harder workers I think I've ever seen in the classroom. And he's a good kid. I really wish the best for him. So it's definitely, it's sad to see him go, but you got to do what's best for your future. And I commend Trey for doing that.
Absolutely, man. I think that's what, I 100% agree with you. When people leave, obviously it sucks. You don't want to see people leave, but these are kids who are looking out for themselves, and they need to look out for themselves because, most college football programs don't really truly care. I think Iowa is one of the exceptions to that, but even still, you need to look out for yourself and know where you need to go to get the playing time and ultimately get the exposure that you need. So, and jumping in the line of exposure, there's no Senior Bowl invites so far for Iowa Hawkeyes. They've kind of announced most of the roster. Typically, coaches sometimes wait to hand out some of those invites. I really thought a guy like Parker Hesse or Jake Gervais would potentially get an invite, but nothing's come so far. I thought that was a kind of an interesting development. I don't know if you followed the Reese's Senior Bowl at all, but want to get your thoughts if there's anyone that you really thought would be making that trip for Iowa. Gwen, we lose you there? All right. Well, while we wait for Quinn to get his audio to jump in on and working, we'll jump into the men's wrestling team. Did beat Lehigh 28-14. That's a big win for the number 4 ranked wrestling program. Lehigh is the number 15 team in the nation. They beat them 28-14. Big win considering the struggles Iowa had against a weaker Iowa State opponent the past week. And then it sounds like you might be back there, Quinn. Just jump in where you get a chance to. And then
hello.
Yeah, you there?
Did that do it? Yeah, there we go.
Perfect.
Like I said before we went on, my mic's a little fidgety sometimes. So
no worries at all, man. I was just
what I was saying before. What I was going to say to answer your question, I think Kirk Ferentz. I could really see him sending Keegan Render to the Reese's Senior Bowl. He's had a productive senior season. I think he's definitely at least played his way to a free agent contract if he doesn't get drafted in the NFL. He's a really smart offensive lineman, and you have to be a smart guy to play center, especially on at an offensive line as good as Iowa. So Keegan Render is another guy I think we might see get a late invitation to the Reese's Senior Bowl.
Absolutely. That's a very good call. I believe he was third team all Big Ten or maybe even second team all Big Ten. So it'd be interesting to see if that happens. I know I'm kind of looking forward to seeing if any Iowa Hawkeyes get invited or, get those late invites just because I currently travel out to New Orleans a lot and it's a pretty easy drive for me. What I plan on doing is trying to make it over there for a couple of days. So awesome, man. And then from the men's basketball perspective, the AP rankings came out today. The men's team fell 4 spots to 22, and that was expected. They got blown out by Michigan State, but they won against Iowa State. For more reference, Wisconsin also fell after losing to Marquette. And then ISU is also getting some votes. So that was a good win for Iowa. I think we're going to find that Iowa State has a really solid team, as we kind of talked about earlier. And then on the women's side, they actually stayed the same at 16. So they had 3 straight wins this past week. And then they kind of they play UNI on Saturday, and they have a tough game against Drake later. But for right now, they're kind of staying at the status quo of 16. And then, they've definitely had a great year. That win against Iowa State on Wednesday night was definitely a thrilling one. Tania Davis heading the step back 3 to win the game. This is an Iowa women's basketball team that could. This is probably, I would venture as far to say this might be the best Iowa women's basketball team since the team that C. Vivian Stringer took to the Final Four back in the early 90s. Yeah, man. And the thing is, when you have a player like Megan Gustafson, you can go anywhere. Having that star player to lead your team makes you tough to defend because, she's going to be an All-American again this year and potentially, be player of the year because of the performances she's putting up. It's just been so impressive watching her play this season. It's truly not to get, put a lot of hyperbole in here, but she's truly magical watching her play.
And I've said time and time again, she might be the most exciting basketball player, men's or women's, to don the black and gold since Ronnie Lester was playing for the Hawkeyes back in the late 70s. And maybe some of you younger folks out there listening to this, if you don't know who Ronnie Lester is, Magic Johnson once said of Ronnie Lester, he was the toughest player I ever had to guard in college. And that was Magic Johnson saying that. That just gives you an idea how good Lester was. He was on the last Iowa men's basketball team to make a Final Four in 1979-1980, but unfortunately got hurt in their Final Four loss to Louisville, the eventual national champions that year.
Yeah, it's pretty high praise, I think, all around. And for those of you who don't maybe pay as much attention to the women's basketball team, you need to be watching because this team could be could make some, could do some damage in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, they had a tough game against Notre Dame, but just a lot of things weren't clicking in that game, and they do have the talent to make that deep run.
And that, I mean, Notre Dame is all you got to remember too. Notre Dame is one of the top programs in women's college basketball in the country. They're in there year in and year out with teams like UConn, Mississippi State, South Carolina. That's not a bad loss to have on your resume whatsoever.
Absolutely. You make a very good point. And like I said, I think if you get hot in that game, you could still do some damage. And obviously Notre Dame isn't invincible. We just saw them lose earlier this week to UConn, or not earlier this week, last week to UConn. So it'll be interesting to see, and we'll continue to track that as we go on. One other kind of cool award I wanted to get to is the Heisman Award, which is given to basically, and it's a fantastic award, but it's given to offensive or defensive linemen, guys in the trenches that did the most unoffensive or defensive lineman type of thing. So basically, did they intercept a ball? Did they run for a touchdown? Did they catch a touchdown pass? And our very own defensive tackle, Sam Brinks, was nominated for the Heisman. He was one of the 5 finalists for his touchdown catch on the fake field goal against Penn State. Obviously, if you did get a chance to check out Dear Old Gold, you will notice that he did not win. Unfortunate, but he did lose to at least a pretty solid competitor. Kyle Phillips won from Tennessee. And if you got a chance to watch his tape, just go to the Heisman Award. It's on Twitter. You can look at all their Twitter videos of the different plays that made the 5 finalist picks. Kyle Phillips got the ball and just started chucking Alabama defenders off of him as he rumbled for a touchdown. So Sam Brinks might have been more intentionally athletic, but Kyle Phillips is pretty darn good. And then wrapping it up, we have 3 All-Americans that were named today. Awesome to see. That was tied for the most All-Americans in the Big Ten from this year. We have TJ Hawkinson and Imani Hooker taking home second-team All-American honors, and Noah Fant bringing in the third-team All-American honors. So fantastic to see that from a Kirk Ferentz program. Obviously, we have a ton of talent on this team. For me, it's almost proving how talented I thought this team was and how much better they could have done. It's unfortunate that they're sitting 8-4, and I had such high expectations, but still nice to see at the end of the year 3 All-Americans. Awesome to see that recognition given to the Hawks.
Oh, absolutely. And those are 3 guys that I think that were most deserving on the team. Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, especially for him to maybe have the best tight end duo college football has seen in a long, long time, especially at one school. And Imani Hooker is a guy, he got, first team All Big Ten, second team All American, but sometimes you just really didn't hear a lot about him, especially how good Iowa's front 4 is, and some of the other members of the secondary, being in the shadow of players like Josh Jackson and Desmond King from years previous. It seemed like you didn't hear a lot about Imani Hooker, and he was a really solid player. And from what I heard, Imani is, as far as I know, he's not going to the NFL. He's going to wait till after the bowl game to see where he stands. I have a pretty good gut feeling that he will be staying for another year at Iowa. I think he'd really benefit from another year at Iowa. But I think what Salson has done at Iowa, he'll be one of the better defensive backs, which is saying something, especially with some of the talent we've had over the last few years, but one of the better defensive backs Iowa's had in the Kirk Ferentz era.
I 100% wholeheartedly agree. We talked about, if you don't get a chance, if you're listening to this now, make sure to check out our Friday episode, because I talked a lot with Sarah Bettinger, one of the co-experts at NFL Mocks on the Fanside Network. We talked a lot about Imani Hooker and whether or not, he might be going to the NFL. And that was kind of the sentiment we got as well. I mean, he's just not, for some reason, he's not getting the hype from draft scouts all over. I mean, he's not even on the top 10 of safeties available in this class, which is ridiculous to me, but I think it'll benefit the Iowa football program. I think it'll benefit him to have another year, come out, get some more game film. He'll be going into the preseason with a little bit more hype, and maybe some people will be watching some of his tape a little bit more. And obviously, if Anthony Nelson declares, there will be an opportunity for some people to, see what Hooker does, because it doesn't matter what part of the tape you're watching. Hooker's involved in almost every single play, and he gets involved at every phase of the defense. He had I think he had a sack this year. He played a lot of linebacker, had a couple interceptions. I mean, the guy is just impressive, just a true jack of all trades. And typically the thing that goes along with that is jack of all trades, master of none. But he really did a great job of playing all 3 phases.
Yeah, he was definitely a spark. He played outside linebacker whenever Iowa went up against spread teams, when they kind of went to their nickel formation that they ran exclusively against teams like Indiana or Penn State or Purdue. And I thought he did a really good job in those roles. And that can show how versatile of a defender he can be. And I think that would really, open the eyes up to NFL scouts thinking, hey, we could stick this guy at safety, or if we really wanted to, we could bulk him up and have him play outside linebacker, because nowadays in the NFL to play outside linebacker, you got to be pretty fast to be an outside linebacker in the NFL. So he's definitely someone that defensive coordinators in the NFL really could love having in terms of versatility.
I absolutely agree. He'd be fantastic, and it'll be fun to see what happens. But I honestly do hope. I'd assume he's going to be coming back just because of the limited amount of hype that's been given to him. But we could probably talk all day about Hockenson and Fant and Hooker. I mean, I've loved watching them play. I'm bummed I won't be able to see Fant play in the black and gold again, but I'm super excited about his career prospects. And I do think with the amount of hype that's coming to Hockenson right now, and the disappointing to not disappointing, but limited wide receiver class, there's a good chance we won't be seeing Hockenson after the Outback Bowl anymore. But jumping into So that's kind of going to conclude our segment 2. We want to jump into segment 3. And coming up on segment 3, we're going to be talking about Hawkeyes in the NFL. So Fant, Hooker, Hockenson, we fully expect them to be on this list in the upcoming years. But we're going to talk about the guys who have made the jump to the NFL and are performing outstanding. All right, we are back with segment 3, where we're going to be talking about the Hawkeyes in the NFL. And the first person I want to talk about with you today, Quinn, is George Kittle. And this guy is lighting the NFL on fire, man. And he's doing it for a 49ers team that has had 3 different starting quarterbacks and is starting Nick Mullins, undrafted quarterback out of Southern Miss. This guy is, Kittle is blowing it up right now. He is 10th in reception yards in the league out of everyone, and second behind Travis Kelce and tight ends. And he's 22nd in receptions. Against Denver, man, he couldn't be covered. He couldn't be stopped. This guy just couldn't help but get open. And what I think is more impressive is his breakaway speed. I mean, they're getting him open on crossing routes, and he's taking 80 yards to the house. So love seeing him play. Want to get your thoughts on Kittle?
Well, I think a lot of people who followed Iowa football closely aren't really that surprised at how good George Kittle is doing in the NFL. I mean, 210 yards, obviously, you can't say you expected that in a single game. I think a lot of people that follow the program closely aren't surprised that George Kittle is playing to the level he's playing at right now. He was a very, very good, very athletic football player when he was at Iowa, and he just so happened to be playing in the shadow of his older cousin, Henry Krieger-Coble, who in his own right was a very good tight end at college. And it kind of came at, he also played at a time where Iowa's offense, if he would have played in this offense with Brian Ferentz, he could have very well been 1,000-yard receiver in back-to-back seasons. Just kind of the system he played in under Greg Davis wasn't quite, while it did help it did lend itself to the tight ends a lot. It really didn't use as much as we'd seen in the past, but that's what Iowa's done over year after year after year, is produce NFL caliber tight ends. I mean, you go down the list: Dallas Clark, Tony Moeaki, Scott Chandler, Alan Reisner, just to name a few. I mean, CJ Fedorowicz is another. Iowa's produced top talent tight ends in the NFL ever since Kirk Ferentz got to Iowa City. You go back even before Kirk was there, you had players like Marv Cook, and another notable one is the current Attorney General of the United States, Matthew Whitaker, played tight end for Iowa in the 1991 Rose Bowl. So the list of tight ends that have been stars at Iowa just goes on and on, even past the Ferentz era, back into the days of Hayden Fry.
It's truly impressive. I mean, I think, you talk about like linebacker U and DBU. Do you think it's safe to call Iowa tight end U? I mean, I think it is.
I think as of right now it is. I mean, you produce great talents like Dallas Clark, who should be an NFL Hall of Famer once his eligibility does come around. And Marv Cook was a star in the NFL for years. CJ Fedorowicz, before his issues with concussions, was a top tight end in the league. George Kittle is definitely making his case to be top tight end of the league, and you've got 2 guys coming out of Iowa right now, or at least one guy for sure coming out of Iowa. Noah Fant, and another possible one, TJ Hockenson, that could very well be top tier tight ends in the NFL. So I think it's a pretty safe assumption to call Iowa tight end U.
I absolutely agree. And one thing I want to know for the fans is that we are actually in the works to try to get CJ Fedorowicz on the show. So there's a chance that CJ will be coming on the show, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But we're working closely with him to try to get him on there potentially. And then also maybe Quinn, we can have you back on. We can just do a show about tight end university, man, and talk about the Hawks and each tight end. I think, with the next couple of weeks, it's going to be a little slow, right? There's no football games.
Mhm.
The basketball season's it's kind of hitting a lull until they get into the Big Ten slate of games. So maybe we can have you back on and we can discuss tight end university. I think that would be a fantastic episode. And then kind of jumping away from tight ends, one other player I want to touch on that has just been lighting the world on fire. And you made a good point earlier. If anyone, from Iowa football fans saw George Kittle, they knew he was going to be good. I would say they would say the exact same thing about Desmond King. And the fact that
Mhm.
this guy fell to the 5th round, the NFL should be slapping themselves. This is pathetic that he didn't get drafted until the 5th round because of, to be honest, bullcrap concerns about his ability to twist his hips, his speed. I believe he ran like a 4.55 40. The guy can flat out play football, and that's really all that should have mattered. And this guy has been lighting the world on fire. He is the number 1 ranked corner according to Pro Football
Mhm.
Focus. He just got AFC Special Teams of the Week honors for Week 13 when he returned a punt for a touchdown. I mean, this guy's incredible. I'm a huge Broncos fan, and I hate playing against him. He's so good.
Well, I'll join you in that boat because I'm a huge Raiders fan, and he's killed us so far this year. So, and definitely, I mean, he is. I told a lot of my friends, a lot of the people that I know that are Iowa fans, I told them, don't worry about where he was drafted. Desmond King is going to be a star in the NFL. And this year he has been, he's been a star. He has 3 interceptions on the year, including a pick 6 against the Seattle Seahawks. And he's also got 2 punt returns per touchdown this year. So he's by far and away been one of the, I mean, I think may have been the biggest miss of the 2016 draft class. I mean, it's like or the 2017 draft class rather. It's like you said, to think he fell all the way to the 5th round just because of how fast he ran without pads on is unbelievable to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at guys that, I mean, you don't have to be the fastest guy in the NFL to play cornerback. Do you have to have some speed? Sure. But a 4.5 40, that's not a bad 40 time, especially when you have the ball skills that Desmond King had, and they were always on full display when he was a Hawkeye, especially in 2015 when he had 8 interceptions in his sophomore season, rather.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the success that he's having, the success that Micah Hyde is having, and the what I would assume is going to be eventual success. Josh Jackson has struggled a little bit, has some good moments and whatnot, but I'm hoping that's helping NFL scouts realize what Iowa does in terms of defensive backs, what kind of defensive back talent they're producing, and also to help them understand to maybe stop looking so closely at things that they typically would have thought were super important before and realize that if the guy can play, the guy can play. I mean, Josh Jackson fell to the 2nd round because of concerns about his hips and his straight line speed. And the guy is going to be, he's going to be very strong player for the Packers. Obviously they're having struggles all over the team right now, but, and he even had some moments in preseason, but I hope this will maybe even help Imani Hooker if he comes back for another year to maybe elevate his draft stock just based on the fact that if he doesn't test well, some of these DBs coming out of Iowa, if they can play like they've been playing in Iowa, they can play in the NFL.
Absolutely. And that's what Phil Parker, that's the kind of these guys like Desmond King and Josh Jackson, those are the kind of DBs Phil Parker wants to recruit to Iowa, wants to bring guys in. They may not have the fastest 40 time in the world, but they have unbelievable ball skills. They have, I mean, they're able to jump out of the building. Josh Jackson, for those of you out there that might not kind of remember when he came out of high school, he was a 7-foot high jumper in the state of Mississippi. He was an unbelievable or Texas rather, not Mississippi, but he was a unbelievable athlete coming out of high school. And that's the kind of guys that Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker look for at DB. And you definitely have it there right now with guys like Michael Ojemudia, Riley Moss. Riley Moss is the one example. He was a 13.85, 110 high hurdler in high school his senior year. And if any of you out there know anything about track and field, that was one of the top 5 fastest times in the country. Those are the kind of guys Iowa wants. They want multi-sport athletes, especially for DBs. They want guys that can jump out of the gym and are able to play the football like nobody else they can find in the country. And they've done a great job, especially with guys like Desmond King and Josh Jackson.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I love about the Iowa football program, man. It's the fact that they look for other qualities. They look for, and they have to. When you're a team like Iowa, you're competing against the Ohio States and the Alabamas, and you need to find your edge. I mean, it's not Moneyball type edges, but it's a different kind of edge. Finding those multi-sport athletes who have other skills that can translate to playing football at the D1 level. And well, man,
Yeah.
that will. So we're kind of at time at this point. Wanted to cover a couple other guys, but I think I can save that for another episode. Quinn, I really
Okay.
appreciate you coming on, man. Really enjoyed talking to you today. I
Mhm.
think obviously we'll need to have you back on another time. We can talk about tight end university and jump
Yeah.
into that stuff. Do you have any last comments before I close out the show?
I could just I'm going to do a shameless self plug here. Next, this upcoming Saturday, Iowa is playing UNI the Big Four Classic. I will be on the call for 89.7 KRUI for any listeners out here in Eastern Iowa, or I'll be online at mixler.com/KRUI. Tip off is at 6:30, I believe, at Wells Fargo Arena. I will be on the call by that, just by myself, so I'm flying it solo. So we'll see how that goes, but it should be a fun one for the final Big Four Classic held in Wells Fargo Arena.
Absolutely, man. We'll be listening to you, and also our Locked On listeners can follow you at Quinn Douglas _FS on Twitter, and you can follow the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast at Locked On Iowa, and you can follow me, your host Andrew Wade, at Wade _Andrew, and that'll do it for our Tuesday episode. We'll be back again tomorrow. Have lots of great content coming to you the next couple of days. Like I said, a little bit of a slow period in Hawkeye athletics, but we will not be missing a beat with the stuff we're bringing you. And with that being said, you can follow our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast at. Please leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show. And you can also reach us at lockedonhawkeyes@gmail.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you so much for listening, all Hawkeye Nation. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.